Hello, camera. It's me, once again, W. Hansen, also known as Wanson, also known as guy who rants to a camera about various things, usually fiction. So, you may notice that I'm not wearing my usual, ski mask apparel. And the reason for that is because it is Spooktober. It is spooky season, October. It is the time of year for Halloween. And so I just want to celebrate that by wearing this ghost face mask from 2 years ago. And also, it sort of represents how I'm doing something a little off brand with this video. Because so far, and as it says in my channel description, I like to talk about movies. And obviously that extends into TV shows. But today, I want to talk about something that is more related to music, but it is not the music itself. It is the lore and the sort of built-in conceptual storyline through the music videos and the lyrics and some extra stuff as well of my current favorite band of all time, 21 Pilots. And they have recently finished their lore storyline with their newest album, Breach. And so, what I want to do is a little interesting. We're going to rank all of the lore based 21 Pilots albums, but we're not going to rank them as music albums themselves. We're going to be ranking them by how good I think the actual storyline of that album is, like the plot and what happens in the lore. That is what we will be ranking them by. Sort of keep this channel on topic for fiction. Obviously, this is a fiction channel, so I won't be talking about music very much, but I like the idea of talking about all the different lore of maybe some of these albums. So yeah. Now it's time for the intro. Yep, that's it. Okay, here's the intro. It's the same intro from last time. Watch it. Okay, now that that's done, also I want to do a quick little warning here. If you are unfamiliar with 21 Pilots, and specifically their lore, this video is not going to catch you up. You might want to watch a lore catch-up video before watching the rest of this video, because I'm sort of going to be moving forward as if you already know the lore behind 21 Pilots, and that'll just make it easier to rank all these albums based on the individual storylines of the albums. So, without further ado, let's get into it. There will be 5 different albums we are going to be discussing in this video, and that is because they have 5 albums that are directly following the lore. It begins with Blurryface from 2015, and then it goes through Trench, Scaled and Icy, Clancy, and Breach. So I won't be talking about Vessel or Regional at Best or Self-Titled, because those albums are not direct lore albums. They're not part of the storyline, even if they may have some things that hint at maybe the storyline if you look really deep into it. But anyway, let's get started with number 5. In last place for the lore storyline, I have Blurryface. So let me just quick recap what happens in this album from a story perspective. I'll do this for each of them. So basically, Clancy tricks one of the bishops into letting him out of Dema in Heavy Dirty Soul, where he's intercepted by the Torchbearer. The car then explodes, and the bishop disappears, freeing Clancy. And that is it. It's in last place because, obviously, I do respect this album a whole lot, because it started the lore officially, and it's very interesting because it kind of explores each of the 9 bishops in their own respective songs. Like, each song on the album is associated with a bishop, and it sort of introduces the character of Blurryface as a personification of Tyler's insecurities, and that's something I really like. And so the lore in the album is very interesting in that way. However, the actual plot of the album is the shortest of all the albums. And the lore, like the actual world of Dima and Trench, that is yet to be fully fleshed out at the current period during Blurryface. It's a lot more just conceptual, and so that is why it is in the 5th spot. In 4th place, this may be a bit of a hot take given how important this album is for the lore, but I have Clancy. So I'm going to recap what happens in Clancy now, basically. Clancy uses the Ned antlers to seize a dead body in Dima and perform for a crowd of citizens, bringing them onto the Bandito's side, presumably, before letting go of the body. Now, back from Voldsoy, he makes his way across Trench with the Banditos, the torchbearer helping guide him whenever he doubts himself and disassociates. When he arrives at his destination, the torchbearer disappears and the version of him wearing the Bandito outfit shows up, revealing that he's had the ability to project himself this whole time. Clancy, Torchbearer, the real one, and the Banditos launch a final invasion of Dima, with the Banditos fighting zombies made from the glorious Gone controlled by the bishops, and Clancy taking down the bishops themselves in the tower. However, Nico suddenly appears and attempts to smear Clancy, with Clancy managing to open his eyes at the last second. Now, the thing that really drags down this album is that this album, Clancy, was originally intended to and was expected to close out the story completely. That's what it was marketed as the end of the lore. But instead, with Paladin Strait, with Nico appearing all of a sudden, it ended on a complete cliffhanger. And before Breach was announced, we had no idea if that was going to be the end of the lore or not. And so that feeling from this album just kind of sticks with you. And I think something specific with Clancy and Breach, both of them, that is not my favorite way to handle the lore compared to the other albums is that, in Clancy, there are 3 specific lore songs that go with lore music videos. It is Overcompensate, Navigating, and Paladin Strait. Those are the only 3 specific lore songs. And the rest of the songs off Clancy have very little to do with the lore unless you really theorize heavily. As opposed to the previous albums like Trench as a strong example. What are you doing? Anyway, as I was saying, Trench as a specific really good example, yes, there are songs that go with lore music videos, in the specific plot of the album, but all the other songs, or most of them, actually do, flesh out the lore in, either subtle or not so subtle ways, some examples are, Morph and Chlorine and Leave the City. And so it feels like with Clancy, there's a bit more of a disparity between what is a lore-focused song and what song has absolutely nothing to do with the lore. And I think that kind of weakens the storyline, because the storyline at this point is just the plot of what happens. There's no fleshing out in other lyrics. It's just basically what I recapped earlier, ending with what happens in Paladin Strait, which is, again, a cliffhanger. So, however, this album's lore is still above Blurryface's because at this point the world of Dima is completely fleshed out. And, it's overall still a good storyline. Overcompensate, Navigating, and Paladin Strait, they're all really awesome music videos. And once we have the full ending with Breach, or now that we have it, having the storyline of Clancy there is a lot better than back when it was just a cliffhanger. We had no idea if it was actually the end or not. Now, in 3rd place, for the ranking of the albums by how good the lore is, we have Scaled and Icy. This may come as a surprise because This is sort of a controversial album, musically speaking, at least. But in terms of the lore, I really appreciate this album for just how interesting of a concept it is. So, let me recap the plot real quick. So, the bishops kidnap Clancy and force him to perform for and entertain the citizens of Dima, using his music to pretend everything is great in the city. However, for one performance, Clancy is taken to sea on a ship near the body of Trash the Dragon. Keons betrays the other bishops by seizing Trash and attacking the ship, allowing Clancy to escape and swim to Voldsoy. The bishops kill Keons, and in Voldsoy, Clancy meets a group of Neds, and the main Ned gives Clancy his antlers. Clancy uses the antlers to seize Keons' body and taunt the other bishops, before preparing to make his way back to Trench with the Torchbearer. So the reason I have this album above Blurryface and Clancy in terms of the storyline is that the concept of the album, like being written under the watchful eye of the bishops, like the fact that the album itself is basically propaganda for the villains of the story, that is really interesting. And I think that's sort of an underrated concept of the band. And I didn't mention this in the recap, but the nod back to the Nico and the Niners music video, with the two kids from that music video now being Banditos in the Outside music video, that was really great. It might be like the strangest of all the storylines because it features a dragon, like a sea dragon, and a bunch of Neds, a bunch of cute little creatures with antlers, and one of them gives him his antlers, and it has special powers. It's a little strange, but I like that about this lore. It's all very conceptual, and it gets bumped up from the plot of Clancy because it definitely Clancy progressed the storyline a lot, but this it felt like this album both progressed the storyline and felt more complete. It just felt more complete than the plot of Clancy. One flaw with this album that kind of carries on through the rest of the albums, like everything after Trench, is that it's pretty... You can't really understand the intricacies of the story without the music videos. Like with Trench, obviously the music videos were super important. However, just paying attention to the lyrics of that album, you could generally get most of the story just by listening to the album. However, Scaled and Icy and Onward, the music videos sort of become essential to understanding the lore, and this album is what started that, so that knocks it down slightly. But overall, really good, interesting concept for a storyline. Next up, at the number 2 spot, my second favorite album in terms of the lore is Breach. Now, the most recent album by the band. Let me do the recap. While Nico is attempting to smear him, Clancy has a vision of himself and the Torchbearer among a massive sea of shadows with glowing red eyes, either representing past versions of himself, the Banditos, or the Glorious Gone available to Nico. It's kind of unclear what the shadowed figures represent. Through this vision, Clancy begins to have doubts over his mission to take down Dima. The crowd of shadows eventually ascends into a storm and disappears, and at the end of his vision, the Torchbearer offers Clancy his signature jacket, which he hasn't had on for the whole vision so far. Clancy hesitates to take the jacket before leaving the vision, opening his eyes and returning to face Nico. He battles Nico hand to hand and with the antlers, periodically re-experiencing past moments of the story where Nico had recaptured him. While they fight, Torchbearer and a group of banditos make their way into the city and up the tower. Nico eventually impales Clancy with the antlers and then breaks them. Clancy manages to get up and form his fingers into the bandito symbol, unleashing a shockwave that destroys Nico completely. However, once the banditos arrive in the room, Clancy puts on a red robe and transforms into a bishop. He gives red robes to each of the banditos, all of them accepting it except the Torchbearer. The Torchbearer leaves the room heartbroken, and outside the tower, another bandito asks Torchbearer what they'll do next. To which Torchbearer replies that they will try again, like always, to break the cycle with the next Clancy. The cycle then restarts with another set of bishops. Now, the lore for this album is just astonishing, and I gotta say it, this is sort of an exaggeration, but staying up late to watch the City Walls music video when it came out was the greatest experience of my life. And I think how the ending of this story plays out, like, Breach is just, the fact that Breach closes out the story just makes it such an important lore album. And it's such a beautiful exploration of, like, how battling mental illness, which is what this whole lore is a metaphor for, is a cycle, and it cannot be won easily. In fact, it may just be a never-ending cycle, but we can always try again, just like the Torchbearer and Clancy do every time, and get better at it, and breach the walls further than we did the previous time. That is why this album would absolutely be in first place for the lore if the actual first place pick wasn't just that good, you know? The only thing knocking this back is that the other part of the storyline that happens before City Walls, also known as the Contract music video, it's a super good music video, and I find myself rewatching it a lot. However, what happens during it, like with the sea of shadowed people, and like the doubts that Clancy is having, and him not taking the jacket, it's a lot more ambiguous than most of their music videos. And so I feel like the Contract is like, it's just one of the less clear parts of the story. And I still like it a lot, but that does knock it a little bit down from the number one spot. So therefore, our number one spot, our winner of the album ranking by the lore, is, of course, Trench. Let me recap this real quick. After escaping Dima, thanks to the exploding car during Blurryface, Clancy puts on his Bandito jumpsuit and explores the continent of Trench, encountering the Banditos gazing at him from the top of a ravine. Nico arrives on his horse and smears him, but the Banditos free him from the smearing by tossing down yellow flowers onto him, confusing Nico since the bishops cannot see yellow. Clancy tries to run away, but falls and is taken back to Demo with one of the flowers as a reminder of what happened. Clancy intends to escape again during the annual assemblage of the Glorified and is met with the Banditos. Clancy and the Torchbearer unite and perform together before they and the Banditos get out of the city before the bishops can stop them. The Banditos bring Clancy to their camp and teach him their ways. But the bishops use the vultures at the camp to find out where they are. Nico takes Clancy away again and drags him back to Dima. So, I think overall this album just felt like the most complete storyline. Like, all the other albums, like the lore in them is all a continuation from Trench, or in the case of Blurryface, a setup for Trench, essentially. But the lore of Trench, like, there's a reason it's called the Trench Saga. Like, this is the album that fully fleshed out the world of Dima and Trench and Vialism and the bishops and the Banditos and Clancy. And this is the album that you could know only about the lore storyline of this album, and it could feel complete to you. Like, Leave the City would be the ending. It would function as the ending of the story if you didn't have all the other albums. And in the case of this album, Trench, it would still feel like a complete story, and that is why it is number one. It is also number one because the music videos, Jumpsuit, Nico and the Niners, and Levitate, I mean, there are other music videos that are good too, but, like, the three lore ones feel the most, like, full and immersive. Like, I really like the music videos during Clancy and Breach, and Scaled and Icy as well, but they felt a lot more, like, CGI heavy, especially Clancy and Breach. Scaled and Icy was sort of a middle ground, but the Trench music videos just felt super, like, real, and, like, real locations. It just felt really tangible. and it felt like you were just being transported to this world of Dima and Trench. And like I mentioned before, this album, like, there are 3 songs with lore music videos that are the actual plot of it, but the lyrics of all the other songs, or most of the other songs, also flesh out the lore, again, such as like Morph and Chlorine and Leave the City, and other songs, and that makes the album feel a lot more rich in the lore. It feels like you're exploring different aspects of the characters, or specifically like the headspace of Tyler or Clancy in this world. And the album hints at the same themes Breach does, with like Breach is like sort of the end to this whole thing, but then it comes back like in a cycle. Like Breach is the end point of the full cycle of like Clancy getting out of Dima and becoming a bandito and then rebelling, and then it ends with him becoming a bishop. But what happens in Trench is sort of like a repeating like mini cycle within that cycle of Clancy continuing to just try to escape the city of Dima itself and getting better with each attempt. And then in the song Leave the City, it's like, you know, he's not going to leave the city right now. He's not able to, but there's hope that one day he will find an escape from his pain, you know. And so I think the way things play out in Breach feels more like complete and, you know, more insightful and just beautiful. But the fact that those same themes are like also really present in just the album of Trench itself, and also all the other things I mentioned, that is why this is number 1. So that is my ranking of all of the 21 Pilots albums by how good I think the lore is. I hope you enjoyed watching me run out of breath in this ghost face mask, and I hope you will continue to enjoy this video because now there's going to be an outro. So please enjoy the outro, and I will see you later. And probably talk about a Halloween movie or something. Bye.
Ladies, I'm an escalator. Going upstairs, so see you later.